Captain Zirk of the Galactic Defense Force couldn't believe what he was seeing. His third eye stalk twitched involuntarily, a nervous tic that always emerged when his highly logical mind encountered something that utterly defied explanation. And right now that something was the contents of the United Earth Defense Force's primary weapons storage facility. "Major Cooper," Zirk said, his translator struggling to convey the precise mix of confusion and condescension in his native tongue. "Please explain why your species maintains such an extensive arsenal of primitive ballistic weapons. Surely this must be some sort of historical museum." Major Tom Cooper, the human liaison officer assigned to the alien inspection team, smiled in that peculiar way humans did when they knew something you didn't. It was an expression that had been driving the galaxy's more advanced species absolutely crazy since humanity's introduction to the galactic community. "Nope, not a museum at all, Captain," Cooper drawled, casually leaning against a rack of what his species still called assault rifles. "These are all active service weapons, every last one of them." Zirk's secondary breathing bladder nearly seized up. But you have plasma rifles, particle beam emitters, directed energy weapons of quite reasonable quality." The alien officer gestured with two of his manipulator appendages at the section of the armory containing the more sensible, modern weapons. "Why would you continue to manufacture and maintain such outdated technology?" Cooper's grin widened as he picked up one of the ballistic weapons, a device that still used the crude chemical propellant system developed by humans centuries ago. "Well, Captain, sometimes the old ways are the best ways, or at least that's what my granddaddy always used to say." The alien inspection team's scientific advisor, Dr. NX, shuffled forward on her gravity manipulators, multiple sensor arrays extended toward the weapon. "But the maintenance requirements alone must be astronomical. The logistics of manufacturing and transporting physical ammunition, the sheer inefficiency compared to energy cell technology, it defies all rational military doctrine." "Maybe so," Cooper replied, dropping the magazine out of the rifle and catching it with practiced ease. "But you know what they say about throwing out the baby with the bathwater." Zirk's translator completely failed to parse that idiom, producing only a burst of confused static. What? What does infant hygiene have to do with maintaining obsolete weapons systems?" "Figure of speech, Captain, just means that sometimes when you're upgrading to the latest and greatest, you might want to keep some of the old stuff around. Just in case." "In case of what?" Zirk demanded, all three of his eye stalks now focused intently on the human. "What possible scenario could justify the expense and effort of maintaining two parallel weapons technologies?" Cooper carefully replaced the rifle on its rack, then turned to face the alien delegation with an expression that somehow managed to be both diplomatic and insufferably smug at the same time. "Well now, that would be classified information, Captain, but I'm sure a sophisticated being like yourself can imagine a few possibilities." Zirk's exasperation threatened to overwhelm his diplomatic training. Humans. Every interaction with them was like this. They seemed simultaneously primitive and cunning, backward and advanced, illogical, and yet possessed of some deeper wisdom that they refused to explain properly. It was maddening. "Very well," he managed to say with what passed for dignity among his species. "Let us continue the inspection. I assume you maintain these archaic systems in all your military installations?" "Oh yes," Cooper replied cheerfully, "every single one. Standard doctrine these days. Would you like to see our training facilities next? We've got some exercises scheduled that might interest you." As the delegation moved toward the exit, Zirk couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vitally important, something that would explain this bizarre adherence to outdated technology. But what? He had a nagging suspicion he was going to find out whether he wanted to or not. The United Earth Defense Force's training facility was a sprawling complex of combat ranges, simulation chambers, and obstacle courses. Captain Zirk found himself perched uncomfortably on an observation platform alongside Dr. NX and the rest of his inspection team, watching as human soldiers prepared for what Major Cooper had called a little demonstration. Now what you're about to see, Cooper explained, is a standard exercise we run for all our infantry units. We like to keep our troops proficient with both modern and traditional weapons systems. Below them, 2 teams of soldiers were setting up. The first group carried sleek energy rifles that wouldn't have looked out of place in any modern military force in the galaxy. The second group, to Zerk's continued bewilderment, was armed with those primitive ballistic weapons. The scenario is simple, Cooper continued. Red team with the energy weapons will attempt to breach that bunker complex. Blue team with the traditional loadout will defend. Standard combat rules apply. Dr. NX's sensor arrays whirred with disapproval. This hardly seems like a fair comparison. Modern energy shields are nearly impenetrable to ballistic weapons. You don't say? Cooper replied with that insufferable human grin. Well, let's watch and find out. The exercise began with a series of sharp commands. Red team advanced professionally, their energy shields forming an overlapping barrier of shimming force fields. Blue team had taken defensive positions in and around the bunker complex, and Zerk noted with mild disdain that they were using actual physical barriers for cover, rather than deploying shield generators. The first exchange of fire was exactly what Zerk expected. Energy bolts from Red Team splashed harmlessly against the bunker's walls, while the pathetic ballistic rounds from Blue Team's weapons bounced off the attackers' shields without effect. "You see," Dr. NX said, her gravity manipulators bobbing with satisfaction, "the ballistic weapons are completely ineffective against modern defensive systems. This exercise merely proves our point about their obsolescence." "Maybe so," Cooper said, checking his chronometer. "But we're only 2 minutes in. Might want to keep watching." Red Team had advanced to within 50 meters of the bunker when something changed. Blue Team's fire patterns shifted, becoming more concentrated. They weren't aiming at the soldiers anymore, but at the ground in front of them. "What are they doing?" Zerk demanded. "Their rounds cannot penetrate the shields, so why waste ammunition shooting at the dirt?" Cooper just raised his eyebrows and pointed back at the scene below. The dirt and debris kicked up by the ballistic weapons was creating a cloud of particles in front of Red Team. Suddenly, their energy shields began to flicker and destabilize. "What? How?" Dr. NX's sensor arrays were practically spinning in confusion. "Turns out," Cooper drawled, "energy shields have a real hard time maintaining coherence when there's too many tiny particles in the way. All those little bits of dirt and rock interfere with the field generators. Who'd have thought, right?" As if on cue, Red Team's shields failed completely. The next volley of ballistic fire from Blue Team was brutally effective, painting each target with bright splotches of training paint. In less than 30 seconds, the entire attacking force had been eliminated. "Exercise complete," a computerized voice announced. "Blue Team victorious. Red Team, total casualty rate in combat scenario." Zerk's eye stalks drooped in disbelief. But that's not... They didn't even use any fancy technology," Cooper finished for him. "Nope. Just good old-fashioned bullets and basic tactics. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution." "This was just one scenario," Dr. NX protested. "Surely in actual combat conditions—" "Oh, we run all kinds of scenarios," Cooper interrupted cheerfully. "Would you like to see the one where we demonstrate why energy shields are completely ineffective against bayonet charges? Or maybe the one about why you should never rely entirely on electronic targeting systems when fighting humans?" "I think," Zerk said carefully, "that we have seen enough of the training exercises for now." Your call, Captain, though I should mention we've got a joint patrol exercise scheduled with your forces next week. Just a routine thing, protecting some civilian shipping lanes from pirates. Should be pretty boring unless something interesting happens, of course." Something about the way Cooper said that last part made all 3 of Zerk's eye stalks swivel toward him suspiciously, but the human's face was the picture of innocence, which somehow made it even more suspicious. As they left the training ground, Zerk found himself wondering if perhaps his initial report about human military capabilities might need some serious revision. Just how many other obsolete tricks did these humans have up their sleeves? He had a feeling he was going to find out sooner rather than later. Captain Zerk was having a terrible day. What should have been a routine joint patrol had turned into exactly the sort of situation he'd been dreading ever since that disturbing weapons demonstration. The convoy of civilian transport ships they were escorting had been ambushed by pirates at the edge of the Arcturus sector. Not just any pirates. These were using military-grade energy shields and weapons, probably stolen or bought on the black market. Under normal circumstances, this would have been concerning but manageable. But these weren't normal circumstances because Major Tom Cooper was here. The human officer was currently on Zerk's bridge, lounging in a chair that wasn't designed for human anatomy, wearing an expression that somehow managed to convey both professional concern and barely concealed anticipation. "Those are pretty impressive shields the pirates are running," Cooper commented, watching as another volley of energy weapons fire splashed harmlessly off the raiders' defensive screens. "Top-of-the-line stuff. Military-grade, really expensive, I bet." Zerk's manipulator appendages twitched in agitation. "Yes, thank you for that observation, Major. Perhaps you'd care to contribute something more useful to the tactical situation?" "Oh, I wouldn't want to interfere with your command, Captain, though I did send a message to our escort ship, the Thunder Child. Ask them if they wouldn't mind breaking out some of our special equipment. Hope that's okay." Before Zerk could demand clarification, the tactical display lit up with new alerts. The human escort vessel, which had until now been hanging back and ineffectively trading energy weapon fire with the pirates, was changing its position. "What are they doing?" Dr. NX demanded from her science station. "That course change makes no tactical sense. They're leaving their optimal firing position." "Well now," Cooper drawled, "I wouldn't say that. They're just setting up for a different kind of firing position." The Thunderchild's weapon ports were opening, but instead of the expected energy weapon arrays, something else emerged. Something that made all three of Zerk's eye stalks widen in horror. Are those actual projectile launchers?" he sputtered. "Physical ammunition in space combat. The maintenance costs alone." "Probably best to worry about economics later," Cooper interrupted. "Might want to watch this part carefully. For your report, you understand." The Thunderchild fired. Multiple projectiles streaked across space toward the pirate vessels. The pirates, obviously not expecting such primitive attacks, didn't even bother to adjust their shield configurations. Why would they? Energy shields were impenetrable to... The projectiles passed straight through the energy shields as if they weren't even there. The results were immediate and devastating. The pirate vessels' hulls, optimized for deflecting energy weapons, proved embarrassingly vulnerable to good old-fashioned kinetic impacts. Secondary explosions bloomed across their ships as physical ammunition tore through critical systems. "Well, would you look at that?" Cooper mused, examining his fingernails. "Seems like somebody forgot that energy shields are specifically designed to stop energy weapons. They're not nearly as good at handling plain old physical objects moving at high velocity. Funny how that works out." The pirate fleet was in chaos. Ships were either disabled or frantically trying to retreat. Their supposedly impenetrable defenses proved worthless against humanity's obsolete technology. You planned this," Zerk accused, all three eyes fixed on Cooper. "That demonstration at the training facility, the hints about the joint patrol, you wanted us to see this?" "Now, Captain, that's a mighty serious accusation." Cooper's face was the picture of innocence. "Are you suggesting that we deliberately kept our ballistic space weapons secret, knowing that pirates and other potential hostiles would eventually start relying entirely on energy shields? And that we might have wanted to demonstrate this capability to our allies in a controlled situation, so they'd understand why we keep our primitive weapons around?" "Yes," all three aliens shouted in unison. "Huh." Cooper stood up, stretching casually. "Well, that does sound like something we might do. Very devious, very sneaky. Almost as sneaky as, say, not telling you about all the other obsolete weapons we've kept in service. But that'd be classified information, of course." Zerk's translator actually crashed trying to process the implications of that statement. By the time it rebooted, Cooper was already heading off the bridge. "If you'll excuse me," the human said, "I need to go help coordinate the cleanup. Oh, and Captain, You might want to mention in your report that what you saw today was just our basic space warfare package. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about our full capabilities." As the human left, Dr. NX's gravity manipulators were vibrating with anxiety. "Captain, do you think he was serious about having other weapons we don't know about?" Zerk's eye stalks drooped in resignation. "Doctor, I'm beginning to think we never should have introduced humans to galactic society without first doing a much more thorough investigation of their military doctrine. Should I begin composing a preliminary report for High Command?" "Yes, and Doctor, mark it as extremely urgent. I have a feeling we're going to want to revise a lot of our tactical assumptions about humans. A lot of them." The aftermath of the pirate incident had created quite a stir in the Galactic Defense Forces Command Center. Captain Zerk found himself in the unfortunate position of having to explain humanity's tactical innovations to a room full of increasingly agitated senior officers. Major Cooper, naturally, had been invited to provide technical expertise, which he was doing with his usual insufferable cheerfulness. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Vex rumbled, her crystalline form flickering with indicators of severe distress. "Humans deliberately maintained an entire parallel weapons infrastructure at enormous expense, just on the off chance that potential adversaries might become overly reliant on energy shield technology." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds almost clever," Cooper said, helping himself to another cup of coffee, a substance that several alien species had already classified as a potential psychological warfare agent, though I should point out that ballistic weapons are really just the tip of the iceberg. The room went deadly quiet. "What?" Zerk asked carefully. "Do you mean by that?" "Oh, you know how it is." Cooper waved his hand dismissively. "You start thinking about one old technology that might still be useful, and pretty soon you're looking at all sorts of obsolete options. Really makes you think about what other basic physical principles might have military applications." Dr. NX's sensor arrays were practically shorting out. "What other principles?" "Well, take gravity manipulation, for instance. Everyone uses artificial gravity these days, right? Very convenient, very reliable." Cooper's grin took on an almost predatory quality. "Almost makes you forget about the advantages of good old-fashioned centrifugal force or mechanical springs or hydraulics, simple machines you might call them." The Admiral's crystalline structure emitted a high-pitched tone of alarm. "Are you saying humans have developed weapons based on basic mechanics?" Now that would be telling. Cooper took another sip of coffee. "Though I will say that energy shields have a really hard time dealing with things like mechanical catapults. Something about the lack of an energy signature to detect and counter, but you didn't hear that from me." Zerk's translator was working overtime trying to process the implications. But surely you're not suggesting that we might have secretly developed an entire arsenal of weapons based on pre-industrial principles, specifically because advanced civilizations would have no defense against them?" Cooper shrugged. "Like I said, that's classified. Though I did hear an interesting story about what happened when someone tried to invade a human space station that was spinning for gravity. Apparently, they forgot that if you cut the power to a rotating structure, it doesn't stop spinning right away. Newton's laws and all that." The room erupted in chaos as various alien officers tried to calculate the military implications of basic physics being weaponized. Zerk noticed that Dr. NX had pulled out a portable computing device and was frantically researching something called the trebuchet. "Of course," Cooper continued, clearly enjoying himself, "that's all just theoretical. Though I should mention that we're beginning final testing on our new line of combat vessels next month. Really interesting design philosophy behind them, very traditional, you might say." Admiral Vex's crystalline form was now vibrating at a frequency that threatened to shatter nearby drinking glasses. "Traditional how?" "Oh, you know, armor plating instead of energy shields, kinetic weapons instead of beam emitters, chemical rockets for emergency propulsion, really basic stuff, almost primitive, you might say." Cooper's grin reached previously unknown levels of smugness. We call it the Back to Basics initiative, for historical appreciation purposes, of course. Of course, Zirk said faintly, wondering if it was too late to request a transfer to a nice, quiet desk job, far away from any human military installations. Though the really interesting part, Cooper added, is how we got the idea. See, we noticed that every time we introduced our allies to a new technology, they tended to completely abandon their older systems, always rushing to adopt the latest and greatest, never thinking about keeping a backup plan. Really made us think about the strategic value of being unpredictable. The Admiral's voice was barely a whisper. How many other obsolete technologies have you adapted for military use? Now that's an interesting question. Cooper stood up, straightening his uniform. Almost as interesting as asking why we recently started stockpiling crossbows and studying medieval siege engines. But that would definitely be classified information, so I couldn't possibly comment. As the human officer left the room, Zirk couldn't help but notice that several alien military commanders were now frantically taking notes about something called the longbow. He had a sinking feeling that the galaxy's arms race was about to take a very, very strange turn, and somewhere in the background he could have sworn he heard Major Cooper whistling something called the British Grenadiers. The weeks following the pirate incident and subsequent revelations about human military doctrine had thrown the galactic defense community into chaos. Captain Zirk found himself assigned to a hastily assembled task force charged with analyzing and developing countermeasures to primitive warfare techniques. Currently, he was watching Dr. NX attempt to explain their progress to a panel of increasingly frustrated military officials. As you can see, Dr. NX's gravity manipulators wobbled anxiously as she gestured at a holographic display. We've made significant progress in adapting our energy shields to detect and deflect physical projectiles. Fascinating, Cooper commented from his observer's seat. Have you tested it against rocks yet? Rocks, one of the officials asked. Sure, just regular stones about your big. Cooper held his hands apart. The kind you might find lying around on any planet, moon or asteroid. Not that anyone would think about installing simple mechanical launchers on their ships to throw rocks at high velocity. That would be silly. Dr. NX's sensor arrays drooped visibly. I'll add rocks to the testing protocol. Probably want to test different sizes too, Cooper added helpfully. And shapes. Never know when someone might start getting creative with their rock selection. Though I hear the properly shaped ones are more properly called flint napping. Interesting historical technique. Zirk watched as 3 different officials immediately began researching ancient human stoneworking methods on their data terminals. Moving on, Dr. NX said desperately. We've also developed new scanning protocols to detect hidden ballistic weapon emplacements. On ships, right? Cooper interrupted. Yes, of course on ships. Not, say, on asteroids using simple mechanical springs or compressed gas systems, because that would be an interesting oversight. Cooper's face took on a thoughtful expression. Though I suppose nobody would think to mine an asteroid field with simple mechanical weapons. That would be downright primitive. The room erupted in another round of frantic note-taking. Perhaps, Zirk suggested carefully, we should focus on understanding the human military mindset rather than specific technologies. Oh, that's easy, Cooper said brightly. We just look at whatever everybody else is doing and figure out how to beat it with something simpler. Like when everyone started using advanced electronic targeting systems and we decided to start training our pilots in manual targeting. Just in case. A nervous-looking official raised an appendage. Manual targeting. Sure, using your eyes and basic trigonometry, old-school stuff, really comes in handy when someone tries to jam your targeting computers or hit you with an electromagnetic pulse. Not that anyone would think to use primitive nuclear weapons to generate EMPs in space. That would be, obsolete. Zirk watched as several officials began quietly hyperventilating. Though personally, Cooper continued, I'm more interested in your research into anti-boarding protocols, especially after that incident last week. "What incident?" several voices asked simultaneously. "Oh, you hadn't heard? Some pirates tried to board one of our stations. Had all the latest tech personal shields, energy weapons, the works." Cooper's grin took on an almost manic quality. "Funny thing about personal energy shields, though. They're really good at stopping high-energy impacts, but they have trouble with slow-moving objects, like, say, a bunch of marbles scattered on the floor." Dr. NX's gravity manipulators completely gave out, leaving her hovering awkwardly. You defeated space pirates with marbles?" "Well, technically it was the follow-up with cricket bats that really did the trick. Turns out personal shields have a really hard time with simple wooden sporting equipment." "Who knew?" Cooper shrugged. "Though I should mention that the report on that incident is still classified, especially the part about the slingshots." Zerk decided it was time to regain some control of the meeting. "Major Cooper, are you suggesting that humanity has systematically developed countermeasures to advanced technology using whatever we had lying around the garage?" Cooper suggested. "Now that would be a scary thought, wouldn't it? Almost as scary as asking why we recently started stockpiling rubber bands and studying ancient siege warfare, but like I said, that's classified." A junior officer in the back of the room timidly raised an appendage. "What's a rubber band?" "Oh, just a simple elastic storage device," Cooper replied. "Very primitive, almost as primitive as catapults, or pulleys, or levers. You know, the kind of basic mechanical principles that energy shields weren't designed to stop, because nobody thought anyone would be crazy enough to use them in space combat." The room fell into a stunned silence as everyone contemplated the military applications of office supplies. "Well," Cooper said, standing up and stretching, "this has been fun, but I've got a training session to oversee. We're teaching the new recruits how to use something called a bow and arrow, for historical appreciation purposes, of course." As the human left, Dr. NX turned all her sensor arrays to Zerk. "Captain, do you think he was serious about the rubber bands?" "Doctor," Zerk replied wearily, "I think we need to start taking a very, very close look at human office supply catalogs." And somewhere in the distance they could hear Cooper whistling something that sounded suspiciously like, "What shall we do with a drunken sailor?" Classified report, Galactic Defense Force as subject human military doctrine analysis. From Captain Zerk, Special Analysis Division, priority, extremely urgent, to Supreme High Command. After extensive observation and analysis of human military capabilities, I must submit the following report. Be advised that several sections may cause extreme distress in senior military planners. Overview. Humanity has not, as previously assumed, maintained their primitive military technologies out of cultural nostalgia or economic necessity. Evidence suggests this was a deliberate strategic choice made to exploit fundamental weaknesses in modern defensive systems. Key findings. Humans have systematically analyzed all advanced military technology for vulnerabilities to basic physical principles. They have weaponized numerous obsolete technologies specifically because modern defenses are not designed to stop them. There is strong evidence suggesting they are actively developing new weapons based on ancient warfare techniques. Specific concerns. Human ships now confirmed to carry both energy and physical weapons. Evidence of widespread deployment of mechanical launch systems. Disturbing research into siege engines and medieval warfare. Possible weaponization of office supplies, see Appendix C, the rubber band incident. Psychological analysis. It appears humans find genuine entertainment value in developing weapons that run counter to conventional military doctrine. Their attitude can best be described as gleefully primitive. Intercepted communications of concern. Hey, what if we put a trebuchet on a spaceship? Has anyone tested energy shields against water balloons? Do you think we could modify a crossbow to work in zero gravity? What if we filled an asteroid with angry geese? Recommendations: immediate revision of all standard defensive protocols, development of countermeasures against physical projectiles, complete redesign of personal shield systems, psychological screening for any personnel assigned to work with humans, urgent research into historical human warfare techniques, Possible ban on rubber bands in military installations. Addendum, conversation with Major Cooper. During my final interview with Major Cooper, I directly asked why humans had chosen this strategic doctrine. His response, which I feel compelled to quote in full, "Well, Captain, it's like my granddaddy used to say, why fix what ain't broke? Sure, energy weapons are fancy, but you know what's never failed humanity. Throwing rocks at things we don't like. Been working since the Stone Age. Though I probably shouldn't mention our new Strategic Rock Reserve program. That's classified." When pressed about humanity's future military developments, he merely smiled and said, "Let's just say we've been studying this fascinating Earth creature called the squirrel. Amazing what they can do with simple mechanical advantage and stored elastic energy, but you didn't hear that from me." Final assessment. It is my professional opinion that humanity has systematically developed what they call backup plans for every advanced technology in the galaxy. These backup plans invariably involve using ridiculously primitive methods that nonetheless prove devastatingly effective. Personal note, I am formally requesting immediate transfer to a desk position as far from human space as possible, preferably somewhere they haven't heard of pulleys. End report. Addendum. Emergency update. We have just received intelligence that humans are starting a military research program called Project Monkey. When questioned, Major Cooper would only say, "Ever seen what happens when you give a primate simple tools? No? Well, you're in for a treat. I'm upgrading my transfer request to extremely urgent. Respectfully submitted, Captain Zerk. P.S. If anyone needs me, I will be in my quarters studying something humans call Home Alone, which Major Cooper suggested was required viewing for understanding human tactical innovation. I have a terrible feeling about this." Report ends. Attached note from Major Cooper. "Thanks for letting me proofread this, Captain. Just one small correction. It's not Project Monkey, it's Project Monkey. The E is very important for historical meme reasons, but you didn't hear that from me." From